Thank you for having me in your incredible store. I was just saying to Peter that I'm a huge advocate for brick and mortar, amongst a volume of other things you're about to hear about, but I think we live in a really unfortunate age where people go hunting for the best deal online and forget that there is a human component to photography, not just behind the camera, but also in the incredible support that we get from people. So thank you for your amazing commitment to the industry. So we're in Melbourne. I've got a 3-hour presentation to cram into 45 minutes, so as Peter said, hold on. Okay, and thank you all for coming. I can't believe the room is full. So I can't start any story or any talk about light. Am I okay here, or should I stay behind the lectern?
A little bit that way.
Okay, cool. They're doing a technical overlay thing with the images. I bought my very first camera in 2009. I'll let you wrap your head around that. I've never owned a camera that you put film into. I didn't own any camera before 2009. I was involved in a pretty horrific nervous breakdown in New Zealand. My amazing wife, who was from Australia, scooped me up out of a ball of pus, held me tight and brought me to Australia, where I picked up a camera for the very first time and discovered the world of photography. It saved my life. I was dying very fast. So there's my life compressed into a few seconds. And here I am now. I travel the world teaching photography. I presented at Photokina last year. Who would have thought that for a guy who bought his first camera in 2009? Along with that comes a whole lot of really passionate things you're going to hear about. But today we're talking about light painting. So let's get into that. It makes it easy for me if I have, and I like a bit of honesty here. Who knows who I am? That is awesome. The rest of you are just here because there was nothing else in Melbourne to do on a Saturday? True? All right. Or it was either that or it was promoted really well. Look, I think we've all probably seen light painting. I always like to start my presentations with an image. And this is a really special one to me at the moment for a whole lot of reasons. Firstly, it's a very new project for me. I call it liquid light. It's light painting in water. And it's a great place to start because I need you to understand that every single image that you see of mine today is as it comes out of the camera, apart from adjustments. It's like the film days, you know. There's no compositing, no layering. It's just adjustments of saturation, contrast and all that. I like using those knobs and sliders in Lightroom. But it's a precious one to me because 2 years ago I got in the water and developed this process of light painting in the water and didn't manage to get in the water last year because I was too busy. This was about 3 weeks ago in South Australia. It was freaking cold. And you'll see a little later how I've overcome that. But I'm in the water splashing around and getting the balance of a bit of sky along with the light painting in the water with a camera on a tripod that's that far out the water was a bunch of fun. It's projecting pretty well. I'll let you know. What I'm seeing here is pretty close to what you're seeing on there. All right, let's get into it. So we can't talk about light. Who's done light painting? Please, like just straight up. Who's had a crack? Who's fantasized about it but not done it yet? We've got a partial here. I like it. Well, hopefully by the end of what I want is in 45 minutes for you to have a desire, leave here and go and stuff some cellophane into a Coke bottle, put a $2 torch in the end and just have a go, right? Because you don't need to be spending big bucks to do it. But light painting started in 1914. There was a process whereby they, in the old days, kind of like today, they thought humans were robots and slaves. So they put us into factories and made us put things together. They would attach lights to people's hands and get them to put things together, and they would figure out the fastest way by using long exposure photography with lights. So it's light painting, right? 1914. This guy here, Piccolo or something? I think so. Picasso, that's the guy. He was a prolific light painter. I don't know if you know that. I didn't know that till quite recently. And the beautiful thing about Picasso's light painting is, being an experienced light painter, this is a really complex image here. Like, we can see him, we can see the light painting, so on and so forth. This is now my favorite light painting image. I was in Germany presenting at Photokina last year. This young 20-something-year-old guy stood up at a keynote presentation and he said, "I invented light painting, and you are all copying me." Any Germans? Oh, sorry if my German wasn't that good. So what we did is I was presenting the next day, so we dug into the archives to look for some evidence that maybe he didn't invent light painting, and we found this image here. And I messaged Ben back in Australia from Germany. I said, we need to get some photo enhancement on this image. So we sent it to CSI and they did some deep enhancement on the image, and we've discovered that in fact in this image here we can see that no, he did not invent light painting. That's a good one anyway. I'll move on from that. Unless you're a light painter, that's a complex joke. I'm very open about how I deal with mental health. I still suffer quite horrifically from depression. I haven't had a drink for a lot of years. When I left New Zealand as a blithering mess, this was me. And I created this image to celebrate Mental Health Awareness Week a few years ago. And I'm a massive advocate that photography, and for me light painting, is an amazing way to recover, to get away from life and to get out and enjoy nature and discover yourself. And that's what I did with light painting. Again, this is a single exposure, straight out the camera. There's a little bit of, I added some white here, but this is in my studio. At our workshops, we go through how to actually do this, but today I'm just going to show you a bunch of techniques. This was the very first light painting tool I ever made. It was in the Barossa Valley at the back of my father-in-law's house, and I had a piece of aluminium and I was drilling holes in it and gluing LEDs in and trying to figure out how to use a soldering iron. He thought I was crazy, he was right. But yeah, so this was the very, very first bit of light painting I did. I discovered it on Flickr when I realized that all my amazing photographs of the Barossa Valley were exactly the same as everyone else's amazing photos of the Barossa Valley. I thought I was Henri Cartier-Bresson, as we all do when we first get into photography, I suppose. I've skipped about 43 slides there, you'd be happy to know. And then what I did is I stuck a light on the end of a bit of string and I started waving it around, and ended up in the West Terrace Cemetery in Adelaide. That's right, this is being filmed. See how I'm sucking it in? Yeah, and I started doing this, and then I realized that I discovered this thing on Flickr called orbs, and this is one frame, and that's the very next frame. And I created my very first orb, amongst other types of light painting that I was discovering. But what I ended up doing is taking this particular piece of light painting, which is an orb, and I decided I wanted to make it my own. I wanted to take it and make it the best I could. We're doing okay. This is good. This is incredibly early. This is probably in the first 6 months of me buying my first ever camera. And the reason I love this photograph so much is because when I put it online now, it still gets about 7.5 likes, which is pretty cool. But when I look back on it, it's neat because when you're looking at it, you're trying to figure out what is this thing? Well, it's an orb and there's some reflection. That thing over in the corner is the moon setting at about 5 o'clock in the morning. It's a blue moon, which I realise now is pretty special. But the neat thing about it is that technically it's a really shit photo. It's noisy, the vignettes really poor, it's probably out of focus, but it doesn't matter because no one ever looks at this image and thinks that. They're trying to figure out what it is. It's compelling, it's different. And I made it with a Canon 450D with a plastic 50mm lens, which still works, and I still use it. And I still put those images online just to prove that no one ever comes back and says, dude, you need a new camera. There's a serious problem with this image. So I started taking this thing around the world. This is in a place called Austria in Hallstatt. And why I love this image is it represents really well what you can do with the full moon. So this is the middle of the night, it's about 2 a.m. And you can see the stars at the top of the image. And it's just a really long exposure under a full moon. I'm in there spinning for about 62.3.4 seconds. I then walk out of the image and I leave the camera exposed, absorbing the moonlight into the image. It can get pretty extreme. This is the middle of the night. It's crazy. It still boggles my mind when I close the shutter and look at the back of the camera and I see blue skies and bright images. And often, as with this, in this instance, we're actually dialing the camera back because we can overexpose it, which still blows my mind. A beautiful still night on Kangaroo Island in South Australia, and sometimes it's not always a beautiful, lovely night. This is a phenomenally stormy night. Oh, hang on, I don't want to get in front of your thing. The water is washing up almost onto that obelisk. The wind is blowing very hard. I'm on a 200mm lens, and managed to find a little circle of area there to stand on and spin my orb. So the weather can be amazing. This is a great image because it proves to me what I think we all know as photographers. I'm still learning pretty heavily, and that's that when you get an image, just let it be and go, take it away and move on to the next thing. I captured this photograph very early and spent 3 or 4 years afterwards going back trying to recreate it every time the blossoms came out and never got it. And this still for me is one of my favorite photos because it's about a 7-minute exposure, and when you see it in high resolution, the blossoms are perfectly still, they haven't moved. Yeah, and I shouldn't have been there either. The full moon can still work under quite a dense cloud. This is in Austria. We were in a mad rush back to the airport, and I said to my wife we needed to stop for me to get this pin. She was in a mad panic in the camper van, and I was up there spinning away, but you just go longer. So this is probably about a 7, 8, 9 minute exposure, just to allow the moonlight to come through the clouds. But again, of course, I'm only in there for about a minute. I walk in, I spin the orb. I'll show you how I do that in a minute. I'll show you now. Because it can be a little confusing. All it is this thing here, which is some lights on the end of a bit of string, and I'm spinning it like that, but then I turn around. Now I won't do that because I like you. So I'm only doing that for about a minute, and then I get out of the scene and let nature take its course. And the beautiful thing about light painting, and I think why I was attracted to it so much, is that when you're doing a 6-minute exposure and you're only in there for a minute, it leaves you 5 minutes to lie on your back in the grass and stare at the sky, or meditate, or have a think about how you need to be a better husband. Yeah, funny story with this image. I'm a massive advocate that in this digital age, when we put an image on the internet, we don't own it anymore. I get pissed off when I see people putting photos online with their watermark through the middle of it. You know, I mean, get a grip, you're not that good. So I'm just really bold. When I put photos online, you just put them on at a sensible resolution. From what we've counted, this image has been shared on Instagram pages and liked way over 1 million, about 1.2 million times. And I take real joy from that. I can't sell the bloody thing. I've tried. But I've printed it on everything, acrylics and this paper and that paper. No one will. So here's a bit of contrast for you. So it's quite flat there, which is kind of nice for when you're spinning. You can just sort of stand there and do your thing. So again, this is the middle of the night. That's a full moon. You can see the stars. Total opposite. This is a rocky thing and wind and rain, and I found a tiny little sort of nearly level area there to sort of stand and spin on, but sometimes that challenge is like, I love it, getting out there and finding the thing. We're going good for time. We might get through all the slides. This is great. I have a commercial photography business, and I'm a filmmaker, but I'm really bad at Photoshop. I could probably come to Michael's for some training, I imagine. But I see some photos where you take all the colour out of the image and then you make one thing really bright. That I haven't done that here. This is straight out of the camera, and it just blew me away because that's how I remember the night being dark and windy and wet and freezing cold because it was in South Australia. Not all images happen instantly, and I think this is something that I love in the workshop tonight. I bang on about this incessantly, is whether it's water splash photography or flowers or portraiture or light painting, we look at these images and we go, wow, that's so beautiful, the mist in the air and the play of the light on the edge of the trees and well, this is about the 23rd time I tried to do this that night before I got it right, you know. They do take time. The light on the side there is a big ass torch, and I just kept moving it back and back and back until I got the amount of play on the trees that I wanted. This one here was the same. From memory, it was about 25 or something, and each exposure was nearly 10 minutes because I've got to walk out, spin the orb, put the orb tool down, create the smoky effect on the ground, walk around the back of the tree, spray the trees at the back with light, turn around, light the top of the tree, walk all the way back to the camera and check it and realise that it was not good. Go out and do it again, and do it again, and do it again until it's right, and then go home and sleep for 2 days. But in a longer form presentation or workshop, I go through the post-processing of this image as well, and I'm really bold about this. This is processed to buggery. It's incredible. The trees look like this. You know, the highlights are nearly blown out. The shadows are almost gone. But yeah, when we're shooting, as with any, light painting is like any photography. We're always looking for the highlights and the shadows and making sure we've got them so that we can play with them later. Excellent. Red Bull. It's going to be a long night. We're going straight from here in a cab to the workshop. Serendipity, I had no idea. We were hanging out down at the beach and I just grabbed my tool and wandered over and did a spin and went back to the camera, and that was on the back. Hadn't planned the amounts of exposure or the aperture settings or whatever, it just happened. But I got my ass down the beach on a cold night. Sometimes that's all it takes. Here's a new slide in the presentation. Ben, are you there? New slide, mate. Watch this. Watch this. Whoa. Now that's not a foam replica of Stonehenge, that's the real deal. It's my mate Phil, that was about 4 nights ago in England at Stonehenge. Pretty crazy. That's one of my tools, and the reason it's special to me is it's one of the tools that I made, that he used. It's quite a complex photo. Excuse me, can you ask me why some of the photos the sky looks blue and some of them it looks black? So, yeah, one of the things, you know, when we talk about, anyone got any questions? So what the question was, thank you, mate. We're a very interactive audience today. Very happy about that. Thank you, Peter, you attract the... So the question was, how come in some of your photographs the sky looks blue and in others the sky looks black? Well, good question. A fantastic question. Many years ago, in 2011 actually, so this is again really early in my photography career, I was in the middle of nowhere, which is that way, and I was doing some light painting, and what I was finding is I was having to adjust the camera a little bit constantly, and I was like, this is really strange, my camera's dying or something. And I looked up and there was a lunar eclipse starting, which I had no idea. And so what I thought is, in several years, I'll be so successful as a photographer that I'll be called to Melbourne to present at a wonderful camera shop, and the question will be asked of me, why sometimes is the sky blue and sometimes the sky black? And so what I decided to do was start taking exposures with the camera settings exactly the same as the sky transitioned from a full moon to no moon, so that I could show you clearly what happens between a full moon and no moon when all the camera settings are exactly the same. And I think you'll be very pleased to notice that I use different colour orb tools so that you wouldn't be bored by the slide. Thank you.
So that means that all your photographs have got moonlight in them to create the background image.
Thank you.
Right?
Yep. Oh. This one here, we call that a supplementary question. Yeah. That was very good. Thank you very much. That was... We're doing good for time, we can fit that one in. So what you'll notice in this image here is that there's no blue, so this one here is in pitch black. And so the joy of that for me as a light painter is it means we can just open the shutter for as long as we like and just go crazy. In a more technical presentation, I would describe to you how aperture affects the brightness of our light painting tools and shutter speed affects the ambient light. And alas, we are constrained by the clock, so I'll move on. Oh, look at that, Stonehenge. Hi, Phil. See this, young people? See this symbol here? I know it's on a weird angle. It means danger. Climbing down an open mine shaft to place tea lights to create the beautiful effect of a glow from below is highly dangerous. Don't do that, all right? Good. Good. We passed occupational health and safety regulations there. Seeing how we're going well for time, I'll give you a little history on this photograph. So, steel wool is really dangerous, which is this fire stuff that we do. Again, mainly focusing on the young humans in the corner here. They're the ones who generally set things on fire. This is a really long exposure. So I've got the tripod set below the jetty. I've gone out, I've spun the orb, which takes 62.3 or 4 seconds. I've used a red torch to illuminate the red torch here to illuminate the jetty to give the amazing effect of the glow of the orb. I've then run up the beach, up onto the top of the jetty and along the jetty and prepared my steel wool, which takes quite some time. And it's blowing very hard. Spin the steel wool, come all the way back along the jetty, run down, puffed and closed the shutter. And the wonderful thing about this is it's captured with an Olympus camera. I have to refer to them 3 times in the presentation. Sorry, I'll continue on. So it's captured with a little Olympus camera that I'll show you in a second. But the wonderful thing is it's using an Olympus function called live composite. And what that means is that we can do an unlimited, 3 hours of long exposure without overexposing the image. I won't go into it too aggressively. But what I will do, considering we're at a camera store, at a very high-end event where there's probably a lot of very technical photographers in the crowd, the top left-hand corner of this image, I've zoomed in on. It's a little tricky to see in this light, but there is no chromatic aberration. It's perfectly crisp and clear. You can tell that it's a 14mm UNC thread nut, bolt under there, and it was captured with a camera that you can now buy downstairs for about $600. That is about as aggressive as I'm going to get to make you believe and realize that you don't need a really expensive camera to create compelling photographs. Although those Leicas are really nice. I was ogling those a little earlier. And the gold-plated Hasselblads in the museum look pretty nice. I bet that'd be nice for light painting. Peter, you still there? Oh, yeah, good. Yeah. I jest. So here's the thing. Olympus just launched and I'm happy this is going on YouTube. You can cover up Olympus and you can make this the base model of any digital camera available in the world today. I recently challenged myself to go on a 2-week road trip across the country, and I just did my insurance, about $150,000 worth of camera stuff. But I challenged myself to take that body and that lens on a 2-week road trip and only shoot with that for the entire trip. And we did some light painting on the way. This image was captured with that camera. This image here was captured with that camera. And it's quite a technical photograph. You know, it's kind of was sitting about that high off the water at the time. But just a huge amount of fun. And just to make the point about cameras, this is an image that I took at a whale stranding in South Australia, and I had all of my pro gear with me, but it was over by that whale, and I was having a break from the smell, which, if you've ever been near a dead whale, is horrific. And I was standing there taking a break, and I looked to my left, and there was a guy who kind of looked like the whale. There was the Channel 7 crew up on the hill, which I thought was pretty funny. A whale, and they were burying it, and there was this beautiful news story in front of me, and I reached into my pocket and I pulled out this is not the new iPhone, by the way, I know it's small, pulled out my iPhone and I just went panorama, put it back in my pocket. I delivered about 3,000 images to the South Australian Museum, and this is the one that went on their annual report on the website. It's the one that got used the most, and I shot it with an iPhone. I put this in the presentation on the plane flying over today because I remembered that I took it. This is a little place in Melbourne. I don't know what it's called, but it's beautiful. I was over taking video and photographs of this incredible Donald Bradman's granddaughter. She was recording an album. And I was standing on the stage. This is a 7-14mm lens. I was about this far away from her face taking photographs, and we went into where they do all the knobs and stuff. our guy would know what that means. And they were knobbing and things, and the guy says to me, "What were you doing out there?" While I was taking photos. He said, "Mate," he said, "I can hear you breathing. You weren't taking photos." And the beautiful thing about that is these guys were very experienced audio engineers, and they said in their entire career they had never seen a photographer on a stage capturing images of during an actual take. Because when you see photographs of anyone in a recording, it's while they're warming up or while they're preparing or whatever. And what I managed to capture on the day was that, which is her. I mean, anyway, I made my point. Brilliant. So I spin a lot of orbs. Here's some other light paintings. Here's how we're talking about it. When I'm creating orbs, this is exactly the motion. I won't actually do it for 62.3 seconds. Then I discovered blades, and this is. We bought 80 kilos of this stuff for tonight. So that there is a blade. So it's a piece of acrylic with the torch in it, which is what the green part is there. And so my light painting went from being this to, well, you can imagine, I've just got two of them going, I won't yell because I've got a mic on, like a loony from one side of the room to the other. So things kind of changed in my light painting when I discovered blades. And it was beautiful because light painting, if we think of light painting as painting, so when you're painting, you have brushes, you have different textures, you have different thicknesses, different shapes. I've got a few here. And so with light painting, it's exactly that. We have a brush and we have different canvases. Sometimes it's in the forest, sometimes it's here, which is in a big room. So the term we use is light is our brush and night is our canvas. So for me, I started taking it into different places. This is in the South Australian Art Gallery. There's a hilarious story that goes with this, which I don't have time to tell you, but those paintings there are not IKEA. They're the real deal. And it was dark. And this is a Rodin. It's a little tricky. It's a technical photo, but the play off the statue was just beautiful. And Ben was with me. We went into the museum thinking we were going to be there all night, the gallery, thinking we were going to be there all night. And I said to the lady, "Well, I should ask you how long we've got." She said, "Half an hour, should be good." So we did like the speed light painting. It was amazing. So I will talk to you about a little bit of technical stuff. It looks like I've stood there with two blades and gone, a beautiful S shape would be nice here. I think the play of the green and the gold on the background would be lovely, and the shape is one I've admired for many years and created the image. That's not how it happens at all. What I do is I set up the camera with an intervalometer, which is where we get our camera just taking when we're doing time lapses, right? And I set it up to do 1 second exposures with a 1 second gap and just set it off firing. And then I stand there with a couple of tools and I'm standing there just doing this. Well, I'll turn one of them on so it looks a little bit exciting. And I'm just standing there like this. And then what I do is I stop the camera. I have a quick scroll through them on the back of the camera and make sure that there's one in there I like. And then I go back to the studio, I load them all into Lightroom, and there's about 700 of them, and I pluck the one out that looks like I planned it. And you get that. And that's a method I use a huge amount now. I'll show you some more examples in a minute. This is the opposite. This takes a little bit of planning. This is a house that Ben's family used to live in, and I walked into the room and I had a vision in my head of this and built it, and it took a little bit of time. Some more blade work. Now I'm going to start moving a little quicker. So this is just a different textured blade. We have them here, but this is 3 different pieces of acrylic blended over to make it look like fire. The image of me in the studio before, that's using this tool as well, just to get that effect of fire. But it's basically exactly the same as that. Can you read that okay? I like that. That's good. Thank you. So joining my love of portrait photography with light painting has been a huge amount of fun and something I'm pursuing. I'm doing really well staying behind the lectern. I'm normally running all over the show. So what we're doing here is a very similar method. I call it the intervalometer method, which is I was talking to you about before, where we just click it going. So what I'm doing is I'm in the studio. I've got my friend here sitting with her elbows on a table. I'm stepped off to the side. I have a large softbox. We pop the softbox. I step into the frame and I do the light painting around her. I step out. I nearly went off there. I step out. The flash goes again. I step in and I do the light painting. And she knows when the strobe's going to go off, and she moves and changes. And then the same thing. We end up with 30, 40, 50 images, and we pick one that worked. And they can be a little more technical. This is a venue, it's an old insane asylum in Adelaide that we do workshops in. I've got a big fan inside one of the cells. I've got lights on her. She's holding a piece of silk. We hit her with the strobe. The fan stays on, and then we move around her with some light painting tools. And the starburst is again, I think it's serendipity is the term. Didn't know it was there. Delightful surprise. The small bit of light over in the corner there, no one was there. We think it was a ghost. That's the story. Storytelling with all photography is a thing, and I do quite a bit of work in the Aboriginal communities. And this was at a night that I spent on a rather sacred lake with a group of people, and this woman came up to me and she said, I really enjoy your work. My son committed suicide, and I want to create an image, and that was his guitar on their sacred lands, and the Flinders Ranges are in the background, and there's no strobe at all. She stayed incredibly still, and it's all moonlight on her. We're going back to do another series with these guys in January, which is super exciting. It's my daughter looking pissed off with someone. It's a bit of fun. That's underneath the old Mitsubishi factory in Adelaide. But again, there was probably 40 or 50 images in that sequence. Okay, let's go. There is one safe place to do steel wool in South Australia, and that's in the water. These are always fun with steel wool, the little explosions on the side here. It's bloody dangerous, you guys. Look at you, don't smile that much. You need to, it's very dangerous. So I had a dream. One night that I wanted to create a light painting tool that was made of glass, because I wanted to get a nice glassy effect. So I got approval from my wife to hemorrhage some money, and I went and had these made. So what did I do next? So, I woke from my dream and thought, I'd really like to make something that was like glass. So I went and had some glass light painting tools made. And the kind of hilarious thing is that they didn't do anything like I wanted them to do, which was not only a bit of a financial error, but I jest. Now, is this a call for time? Oh, good. Whew. Still got 49 and a half slides to go. But here's the beautiful thing, is that see up in the top corner there, it looks like bread, like loaves of bread overlapping in the corner. That was totally unexpected, completely unexpected, and made it all worthwhile, which was great. This is a different colour, some more bread. Look at that, it looks like bread, which is awesome. And the neat thing is that I've only managed to break one, which was neat, much to my wife's horror. Now, do we have a solid 10 minutes left? Oh, wicked. Yeah, that's when you meant to chant.
We're not rugby players, it's all right.
Oh, good. They're weirdos, those guys. Anyway, I know Kiwi and all that. I left my sheep joke at the beginning. So anyway, so I showed you a slide at the beginning about liquid light. So I want to touch a bit on that because it's an interesting process. I didn't just go, let's get in the water with a light painting tool and create some magic that everyone will love and want to buy. I said to my wife one night, I said, I've got this crazy idea. Come down to the beach with me for some light painting. She did this. Again, but followed me like the beautiful human she is. And she sat on the beach with a 200mm lens. I went and walked out into the water and said, focus on me, and went with this exact tool here. And she went, it's done. And I went running out and looked at the back of the camera, and I got the same feeling of excitement I got the very first time I spun an orb. It was like, oh my God, this is a thing. But it's not in focus, of course. And normally I'm one to say, well, a great compelling image, it doesn't matter if it's out of focus, but it mattered because it looked silly. So what I did is I fixed that problem here by, see the little piece of plastic. So I pushed the piece of plastic into the sand, go over to, because of course she gave up. After about 3 frames, she goes home and says, light painting. And so I use the white thing to focus on the lens, and then I go out, I push it into the water so that I can find it by kicking it with my little toe. And then it'll be in focus and it'll be in the frame because it's dark and in the water. The only problem is that these are very quick exposures. They're like half a second or 1 second, and so we have to really crank the ISO and do all these crazy things. And of course you can see my mug there, and we got over that problem by doing this. So that's how I go into the water now. Well, I've got a wetsuit now because I'm kind of addicted, and discovered that this thing I've got here is a snowboarding balaclava that you can't breathe through when it gets wet. So I now use a piece of silk, which is not only quite elegant, but it means I can survive. Straight out, so no editing, straight out the camera. Look at that, ooh, it's quite pretty. Of course, it's the play of the water off the light that just blows me away. Again, it looks like I've tried to create a card for Valentine's Day here with great planning, but no, this is, the intervalometer method looks hilarious when I'm out of the water. When I'm in, it's just, some guys came down and watched me the other day. They said it's like watching some sort of animal flailing and dying in the water. This is where I'm at so far this season. This is a tool that I've designed just to give a little more colour. But liquid light is, this is where we're at. I think this is similar to the one we saw at the beginning. Huge amount of fun. This is using a camera in a waterproof housing, which again was one of those things I thought would be incredible under the water going up with, but it was a bit of a disaster. So there's a thing called live composite. I touched on it earlier and I want to describe to you what it is. Here's an image that I shot. It's very, very bright. There's a huge spotlight here shining down onto this tank here. With a DSLR or with a normal camera, you'd probably get at most 10, maybe 15, 20 seconds of exposure time. I'll give you an idea of how. Oh, apparently I've got to press the button. Push the button. So I'll talk you through what I'm doing. It's an Olympus camera. Is that the 3rd time or the 2nd time I've said it? Anyway, I joke. So I've got the camera set up using the live composite mode. I've set the live composite mode off going, and so what it's doing now is it's taking multiple exposures. It's taking an exposure every 2 seconds, and what it does is the camera sees the light up on the big tank, and it knows how much light is in the frame now, so it doesn't add any more light to that pixel. I'm out there with a light painting tool. It sees that light, and if the light I'm adding is brighter than the light that is on the existing pixel, it will then replace it. So we're at 30 seconds and about 16 exposures, and I won't bore you with the entire thing, but I'm now out there spinning an orb, and you'll see it starts adding it to the frame. And so It's certainly not a function that I use for all of my light painting, but what it's done is it's allowed us as light painters to go into environments where we just never would have been able to work before and create images, which is incredible. So we'll skip that. Of course, for star trails, it's amazing. You just point it at the sky, go and have a beer and come back, and that's what you got. It's like art. This is a really good example of the way it functions. So I just left the camera there, pointed at the stars, and it's doing the same thing. It's just adding the stars as it rotates. I went over to the fire with a shovel and just threw some embers through the frame. That's definitely art, isn't it? Yes. The brightest building in Adelaide, light painting out the front, who would have thunk it? Oh, the reason for this slide is for me to make the point again that a sub $1,000 camera, you can, who needs a Hasselblad apart from Hasselblad lovers? The other beautiful thing about live composite is as an educator, I travel the world teaching people light painting. It means that I can plug into a projector and do my light painting, and you can watch it happen in real time. And what we did, this is Government House in South Australia, and we had about 600 or 700 people on the lawn, including the Governor General, who did a whole lot of light painting first. And we were projecting the light painting onto a massive screen as I was doing it. There were people on the lawn all night going, oh, ooh, wow. Oh. And the impossible photo. Who would have thought that you could be in front of the third brightest shop in the world and do light painting? Now, don't do anything yet. I need 4 questions. Thank you. Up the back.
How come you never appear in the photo?
Oh, you're a legend. Hey, it wasn't a plant either. That's a true question because I know you're all thinking it. So here's the thing. So I'm always moving. Always moving. And what happens is when you're looking at the images, your brain is telling you that it's daylight and it's the middle of the day, but it's not. It's actually still quite dark, and I'm moving. And I'm not wearing a Don Johnson white suit. It's a true story. Thank you.
I'm sorry if I missed this point. You mentioned that you're focusing the white light in the water, but where are you focusing when you're doing these light walls? Are you using a manual focus?
Oh, legend. That was definitely a plant. It's mine. No, I'm joking. So focusing in the dark is a fascinating thing, and there's a whole lot of different methods that we use to do that. Let's say, for argument's sake, I wanted to do the ball of light right in the middle of the room, and there's nothing in the middle of the room. What I do is I just go over to the nearest point, I pop it with a torch, and I focus on it. Now, depending on what lens I'm using, sometimes I use automatic and then flick over, or I use manual. I mean, that's the beauty of live view, is that you can do that. But the reality is that I think a lot of people look at my images and presume that I'm using whiz-bang flash gear and f1 point. There's a 0.95 lens out there. Imagine shooting with that thing. But I'm normally shooting at f5.6, ISO 100. And I'm a massive advocate that you could walk downstairs and buy the cheapest camera that is there that has manual settings, and you can go out and create any image that you've seen today, this afternoon. Thank you.
You briefly mentioned steel wool.
Yes.
Can you explain a bit more what you actually do?
Sure. I'll begin by saying steel wool is highly dangerous.
What do you mean?
Well, it's fire. So steel wool, like actual steel wool that you polish stuff with that you buy at the supermarket. You take that, you take an egg whisk, you stuff the steel wool into the egg whisk, you put a dog collar onto the whisk, you then light it with a lighter and get it spinning, and as soon as it starts spinning, it just fire comes out of it and sets bushes on fire. So don't do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis, for today. It's been great. When you're spinning
Yeah.
the wall, I noticed on your video you're shuffling a little bit.
I
The
am.
diameter there, please.
The diameter of the shuffle?
Yeah, you do a little this
Mate.
go wider.
No. It's phenomenally accurate. There's a point on the ground. I'll do exactly how... Oh. Sorry, Peter, I know you're probably aching to get rid of me. Right, trust me. And I'm moving, actually, I'll go a bit shorter. And I'm looking down at a point on the ground and doing this. That's it. It's exactly the same.
Just going around that point.
3 times.
Thank you.
A pleasure. Tonight, if you come to the workshop tonight, you'll have a chance. I've brought 6 tools with me. Thank you, young lady.
The more times you go around, does that mean stronger?
Absolutely. The more times you go around, the more chance there is of the orb filling in. Because as this is coming up and down, sometimes I'll do it and there'll be a big gap, and that's a fail, and we go again. Now, just before the next question, I need you to know this is a record. We've never had this many questions. Thank you.
Now, I'm just interested to know where you get a tool like that to do the orbs.
Sure. So the flyer that I gave, that was a plant, legend. Ben, how much did you pay this man? So what I'd like you all to know is the flyer that you have, there's a web address which takes you to my website, and I sell a huge array of light painting tools, and the orb tool is one of them. You get the controller, a lead, and 2 different coloured heads, along with a 20-minute tutorial on how to use it. They're $250 plus tax, which is what it costs. I make every single one by hand. That's no shit, and Ben helps me. I mean, no flipping chickens. Sorry, young lady. Now go and have a look. We sell tons of tools. One more question, and then we're going to kill it. Come on, from the front row, 1. Let's go.
Rather than using an intervalometer, if you had the torch in a flash mode, would that give a similar sort of effect, or does that not work so well?
No, an intervalometer works. And the wonderful thing is that now you can go downstairs and buy one for $70. It's a wonderful time to be a light painter. And light painting is a lifestyle, really. I mean, it's exploding in popularity, and anyone can do it. You don't need to spend $250 plus tax. You can go to a kid's toy shop, anything that flashes, stick a torch into a beer bottle, right, and hold them together in front of your camera. Mind blowing.
Battery life, if you have an extended exposure, how do you overcome that? I mean, I tried one up in Central Australia and discovered very quickly that the batteries don't last long.
Sure.
The camera shuts down and you go,
Yep. Well, it's very rare that I go over 3 minutes.
oh.
I mean, the wonderful thing about Olympus cameras, it's number 3. Killed it. It's a thing. You just make sure your batteries are fine and take lots with you. I mean, people talk about mirrorless cameras as being rough on batteries. Just buy more batteries. You know, the new Olympus EM1 Mark II has extended battery life. I find that quite amazing. 800-900 shots and it's fine. I put a battery grip on mine as well, which is a beautiful tool. Yes, there we go.
Great. Well, how was that? There's plenty to absorb there, lots of things. Denis also been kind enough to allow this a recording of his talk today to be put on our YouTube website, or our YouTube site, which will be on within 10 days, I'd imagine. So look out for it there. And thanks for being so inspiring. Oh. And you did point out that Olympus Live Composite.
I have one more thing on that to say. Something that's really important to understand. The very, very, very cheapest camera that Olympus make do that live composite and have built it into everything you've seen here. You can do with a $900 Olympus camera. Yeah, that
live composite is quite unique, and as you very well explained how it works, but it means you can do long nighttime shots and be creative and record like no other camera. So if you've got any interest, it's worth having a look. And we do happen to have our Olympus rep downstairs. His name is Carl, and he's a star, the nicest guy, most knowledgeable. So don't hesitate if you want to know a little more a little bit more about it. So thank you again. Let's put our hands together. Thank you.
Thank you, mate. You guys rock.
And thank you all for coming.
Thank you. You're legends. Legends. Melbourne people are the prettiest as well, I've discovered. It's pretty clear.